the subject of yesterday, which is Shomeret Yavam. Shomeret Yavam meaning, we are using the name just in order for us to be in a more contemporary feeling. Reuven and Shimon, two brothers. Reuven married Tamar. Reuven passed away. Tamar is now a widow. We call her Shomeret Yavam. Shomeret Yavam meaning she is waiting for Shimon to do Levirate marriage. Now, she is in a very awkward situation and we want to take care of her, which is, in one hand, she's part of the family, Reuven Shimon's family. She lost her husband, but by the same token, she's not married yet to Shimon. And Shimon have two options, either to do ייבום or to release her by having וחליצה. Meanwhile, she inherited something. Can be winning a lottery, can be something for her father, etc. And we have a big discussion who has the right over that. And we explained yesterday, differentiate between נכסי צאן ברזל and נכסי מילוג. We're not going there, just go the vignette of the idea of נכסי מילוג, which the Mishnah used, נכסים הנכנסים והיוצאים עמה, which means there is a concept that she bringing a property, let's say an orchard with, let's say, oranges. And we said that if it's in a regular case of husband and wife, she bringing the property with her, but he has no right over the properties like in the modern day prenuptial agreement, but he has the right to the business, which is, for example, the fruits of that orchard. Meaning, she can retain the property, he has the right over the business. The moment they get divorced, it's go back to her. That's called נכסי מילוג. The question is, since she's not married to Shimon yet, and Shimon may be her husband, maybe not her husband, and meanwhile Shimon passed away, we ask a question in regards to inheritance, if the inheritance of the heir of the father, meaning the father of Tamar, has the right, total right over that, or the inheritance of the Shimon, which is the potential husband, has the right over that. And we explained that that's the disputation between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel. That's so far where we are yesterday. Another part we're going to discuss today is a very important part, and I think that one of the crucial dapim in the Tractate Yevamot is this page 39, which is the famous Abba Shaul's view. Abba Shaul is one of the luminary sages who come in and said, I agree with you that there is a huge mitzvah of ייבום. Yet, here is my problem. Since up to this point we have always the issue of erva, which is, we have an issue of list of abomination in Leviticus chapter 18, the prohibition against marrying the brother's wife, and it's all called erva. It's in that category you have a list, relation with daughter, relation with all the other relatives, and therefore, the moment the Torah turned around and said in Deuteronomy 25 that the person have the mitzvah, the brother, the Shimon, have the mitzvah to marry the widow, the surviving brother have the mitzvah to marry a widow, that applies solely if the intent of Shimon, the intent of the brother is to perpetuate the soul of the deceased. Since Abba Shaul said, there are so many cases of people who does that because of money, because of beauty, because of fame, because of all kind of things. Therefore, I hold that it's almost erva. It's almost a violation of one of those lists, Leviticus 18. And therefore, I say, in nowadays, as long as you're not 100% sure, or close to 100%, that the intent is very sincere, he should do וחליצה, release her, and that's it. By the way, in the state of Israel today, that's what they do. Meaning, since they have this Abba Shaul mindset, therefore they impose וחליצה, but did not do ייבום. Okay? So where we are? We are page 38b, 2 lines from the bottom of the page. אביי אמר, רישא דנפלו לה כשהיא שומרת יבם, סיפא דנפלו לה כשהיא תחתיו דבעל. Which means, in the first clause of the Mishnah, when we talk about property that she brought at the very early stage, it's her. She can sell it, no problem. And that's exactly the idea of disputation between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel. Beit Shammai said Yachloku, Beit Hillel said Bechezkatan. And Rashi said, the Yavam, when he entered that domain, he can continue, which called להמשיך מצב שהיה עם בעל ראשון. He can continue the situation that was in the first husband, but he cannot change anything. Which means the Yavam cannot create a new situation. Now, here the key is וכסבר אביי ידו כידה. which is, according to Beit Shammai, yado adif miyada, which means, כשהם במצב זקוקה, when she's in the זקוקה ban, therefore יחלוקו, according to Beit Hillel, always ידו כידה, which means if it's זקוקה, she's go a lower level. So therefore, נכסים בחזקתן. So based on what we study in Tractate Yevamot, page 83, you see here that the right of the husband, when it's come to נכסי מילוג, and again, נכסי מילוג, meaning a property that always belonged to her, and the husband has quote-unquote temporary rights, as long as they are in a state of marriage, he can derive, can do business, can enjoy the produce that come out of that property. That basically applies only for that time. The moment that she is no longer in a state of marriage, therefore she's only in a state of zkuka, which is lower level, going step down in a level of gradation. Therefore, the koach hakinyan, the ability of the avam over that, the right over the avam, is way lower. So therefore, Beit Hillel agreed that if she, for our sake we call it Tamar, if she passed away while she was in a state of Shomeret Yavam, which means she was in between, maybe she married Shimon, maybe she will be released from that relationship, the Yavam doesn't have the same right as her late husband, and therefore you see here that Abaye hold that the view of Hillel, that Halacha follow them, that the husband's right over his wife, it's the same as her, which called Yado Kiyada, and he cannot overrule her, meaning she has the key power over that property in all different avenues. So therefore, the moment the husband, Reuven, the husband of Tamar, is no longer among the living, and now she is basically waiting for Shimon, for the Avam to do it, so she have more right than him. So, because her relationship to Shimon is only by Zika bond and not by marriage bond. So therefore, he is lower than a husband in the level of gradation. And therefore, Yada Adifa Miyado, she have more rights than him. So in that sense, now we understand why it's this big discussion and disputation when it's come to that property, because she's not here and not there in that sense. And they, as we said previously, that the heir of her late father claim that they have the right. The heir of the potential maybe no husband have some right, but you cannot compare their right to the other rights. So אמר לי רבא איד נפלי כשהיא תחתיו דבעל דכולי על מלוא פליגי דידו עדיפה מידה. If she went ahead and have that property while the husband was alive, so both Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel have no problem with that, that he, meaning the husband in that sense, has more right, at least in a sense of Nichsei Milog. Why? Because here is the idea. They're married, they are together. So therefore, according to Rava, when they are in the state of marriage, imagine, they have, let's use a real example, they have an orchard with oranges, okay? They married, Reuven and Tamar, let's say. And now Reuven managed the business, okay? So here, Beit Hillel come and said, come on, if he managed the business, he come and sell and buy the oranges, etc., etc. He is the one who has all the power. They married, everything is lovely, right? It's not, he's not selling or buying her land, he's just dealing with the produce that's coming out of the land. So in that sense, we considering that more power over the business. She retained the property. That's Nichsei Milog. However, the moment that changed, it's different. So therefore we understand why they need to do Yachlok, why they need to divide it. Meaning she's no longer married she lost her husband, and now she's waiting, maybe Shimon will marry her. So now she, by all means, has the total rights, or at least more than the half of that land, right? So therefore, Reisha de lo avad b'ma'amar, which means, we explained several times, just to make sure that everyone remember, ma'amar meaning some act of betrothed someone, which is, for example, Shimon come in and gives her a contract, saying, we will get married, this is the ketubah, this is my proposal to you. Give her some money, whatever it is, right? He gives us something that show that the letter of intent, right? He wants to show, like in the business world, letter of credit, right? Shows that there is a sincere intent to do business, right? To be together. So, is no reason in the Reisha, the first clause, that Beit Shammai will hold that they should divide it, because they agree with Beit Hillel that Nechasim bechezkata, that property belongs to her, because all this Nichsei Milog, all that properties belong to the Tamar, right? Seifa de avad b'ma'amar, Seifa, which means that he did that before she inherited the property. Again, Tamar lost her husband. Shimon came in and he did ma'amar. He gave her letter of intent. Then she inherited something from the father, but they're not married yet. Alright? So, according to Beit Shammai, ma'amar koneh, there is a concept of kinyan deoraita, which means that there is an act of acquisition by the biblical terms. So therefore, you have here safek nisuin, if it's not yet full act of marriage, when it's come to money, so they need to divide it. Why? Because it is a sincere intent, it's a process. We later elaborate on that, but that's the concept of Beit Shammai. וכסבר רבא, מאמר לבית שמאי עושה ודאי ארוסה וספק נשואה. So in my book, ביורי הכלומר בראשי, I pointed out, Rashi here said, וכסבר רבא, כלומר, אף על גב לבית שמאי כוודאי ארוסה משווה לה. So Rashi have an issue, because originally we understand that they, according to Beit Shammai, it's like Vadai Arusa, that he's in a sense of betrothed, she's engaged. So why you call it Safek Nesua? Again, in those days it was Erusin, which was the first stage, and one Nesuin. Erusin was, in a way, act of engagement. So if you tell me that Ma'amar is Safek Nisuin, that it's already married, so why you said Vadai Rusin? It's like two different terms. So Rashi said that earlier we learned on page 29 that Ma'amar Koneh Kinyan Gamur, that the acting of Ma'amar is a total acquisition. So you don't say that that's a Safek. That's something that is definite, Kinyan Gamur. So Rava hold that that's not Kinyan Gamur of marriage, but only Erusin, only engagement. So therefore, when it's come to this Yerusha, so we said, according to everyone, she have more rights than him. So therefore, if he does as a manner of Ma'amar, we know for sure, and that's I think the meaning of Rashi Klomar here, that she's Vadai Arusa, she's definitely engaged. But as far as Nesu'ah, as far as the marriage, we call it Safek. So there is a Vadai, there is a definite with engagement, there is Safek of marriage. That's, by the way, different than the Rif and the Rambam and Bala Maor and others. And you're welcome to read, I wrote at length in my book. Anyway, the key point to make it clear to all of us is this. She's married, she's not married. She's engaged, but he doesn't have the same right as a married husband. So in the concept of Nichsei Milog, which we must understand, again, we studied it yesterday, we just reinforce it now. Nichsei Milog, she, we call it Tamar, always have full rights over her land, over her property. We are not in discussion over land. we're asking about the produce. Let's say the land worth $3 million and the produce worth $50,000 a year of all these oranges. Okay? The state of marriage is one thing. The state of her situation, it's a little complicated. Why it's complicated? Because you can't call her outside of the family a total free woman. Why? She married Reuven. Shimon has a biblical obligation to do a levirate or to release her. If they engaged, for sure is intent. If you tell me they engaged, this is different between the Reisha and the Seifa. When exactly the act of the inheritance took place. If that happened after Shimon already showed her the intent, they are getting close to the concept of marriage. And now when she's no longer among the living, now you ask those questions, so what do you do with that land? How you divided it? And that's the whole big to-do here. So they said, Vadai arusa lidchot betzara, usfek nesua lachlok benchasim, which means her tzara, which is her co-wife, which is for our discussion her sister, that now run she basically out of the picture because she is part of that. She is the one who potentially married. But as far as they divided the property, she is not considering a married woman. So therefore, the claim over a property by the maybe new husband is not the same as a regular case. Itmar mishmed Rabbi Lazar kvatei de Rabba, v'itmar mishmed Rabbi Yosef bar Chanina kvatei de Abaye. It's a two different direction. Umi amar Rabbi Lazar hachi, we said, wait a second, you tell me that that's what Rabbi Lazar said, I can show you differently. Why? Because according to Beit Shammai, the moment that it was ma'amar, that's sufficient to do what? To hold that this Shomeret Yavam, this woman, that Tamar, that she is waiting for the ייבום, she is the same as Safek Nesua in regards to inheritance. How? Veha Amar Rabbi Lazar, as we mentioned earlier in page 29, Ma'amar lebeit Shammai eno kone ela lidchot betzara bilvad. According to Beit Shammai, a levirate betrothed acquires the Yevamah only with regard to nullifying the levirate bond of a rival wife, so that she need not perform levirate marriage or וחליצה. So this implies that it's not acquire her with regards to imbelling the Yavam to inherit from her. This then stands in contrast to Rava's interpretation. So
Beit Shammai then, basically Beit Shammai rules that Ma'amar is equivalent to Erusin.
In that sense, it's, you can't use the word equivalent, but in they have matching rules, okay. Because in both cases, according to Beit Shammai, is a total sincere intent to have marriage.
Because it's basically an engagement. Ma'amar Erusin is like an engagement. So
yes.
How does Beit Hillel hold then?
Beit Hillel said, wait a second.
But we haven't gotten it yet.
Not yet. But
okay,
as long as they are not in a total state of marriage, since there's a potential that everything will fall apart, you cannot treat it as a total marriage as far as the rules. Imagine, if we don't talk in our modern days, if we don't talk about $100,000, let's talk about $1 billion, right? Right? So for our discussion, how you treat it.
So, but I mean, essentially, but Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai agree, though, that it's not Nesuin. That Ma'amar is not complete marriage like Nesuin. It's more similar to Erusin.
Yes, but the big question is how far you go with that situation. So the Gemara said Eipuch. You know, it was misinformed. The generation have misinformation, which is the word of Rabbi Lazar and Rabbi Yosef bar Chanina is not correct the way, and it just go the other way around. Another option, you don't need to switch it. אמר לך רבי אלעזר כי אמרי אנא דלא סגלה בגט אלא דבאי נמי חליצה לחלוק בנכסים דלא כאן מאמרי, which means in order to do a divorce you need to have a zikah. When it's come to divide the property, it's a different story. Because what the Torah said, the Torah said, look, this Yavam, this Shimon, you have an option, either to do ייבום or to do וחליצה. But we're not speaking here about nisuin. Amar Rav Papa, that's a comment. Rav Papa said, Diyuka de matnitin kvatei dabaei. The precise formulation of the Mishnah is followed the opinion of the Abaye. Ve'af al gav de kashya meta, even we have the issue of when the Shomeret Yavam is no longer among the living, the Ktani. Nechnasim anichnasim v'yotzim, which is the nichsei milog, right? We just use the different words. Everyone knows what is milog, right? So then, my nichnasim, which means after he passed, it's come out of his domain, because he, meaning the husband, the first husband, is no longer among the living. Umay yotzin, what does that mean when you say that they are out? Lav nichnasin lirshut habal, v'yotzim lirshut habal lirshut ha'av. Meaning, originally, Tamar, quote unquote, belongs to her father. A little girl, born, raised, part of her father. She departed from the father, and she married Reuven. Now she, quote unquote, for our discussion, dry law discussion, we don't go emotional, right? Dry law discussion is she now belongs to her husband, which is Reuven. The moment the husband is no longer among the living, so therefore it's go in that sense to back to her father, just for our basic discussion. So it means that she is under tachat Baal velo tachat Yavam. She's nothing to do with the Yavam. Ve'af al gav de kashya meta, which means even at the last clause of the Mishnah we said that she inherited that property while the husband was alive, and the disputation between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel, it's the level of the Yavam, the right over the Yavam with that property. Why you need to, in our language, excuse me, you kill her. Why you need to kill her? Let's talk when she is alive, right? When she is alive, according to Abaye, right? So we can talk about the property while she is alive. According to Beit Hillel, that property, it's totally her. And the Yavam is no right with all the produce that come out of the property. According to Beit Shammai, no. The Yavam is the right, the same as her. They are equal partner. And therefore, as far as the produce, they need to divide it. So why you need to put the case that she's passed, you can speak about her as a living. So the Gemara said, Vetu lo mide. So according to Abaye again, why need to kill her if she's living? And now the question is, to whom that belongs to? Since it's lo nafal tachat habal, only the time of the Yavam, which means this property come to our discussion when the husband is no longer among the living. So therefore, here you see the disputations. So we learned in the Mishnah, Knasa Harehi, which means the moment that the Yavam consummated the Levirate marriage with her, then her legal status is that of his wife in every sense. Lemai hilcheta. So in what rule the Mishnah said that after the ייבום, the Yevamah considering as his wife in any means, in other words, that's obvious. The moment he did the Levirate marriage, she's his wife. Amar Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina lomar shemegarsha begeh. Right? If the marriage didn't work out, right? So forget it. You don't have to bother to call her Yevamah by any means. She's a normal husband-wife relationship, and therefore, if the marriage not working well, he give her get. So in other words, if Shimon comes in and said, no, I want to do וחליצה, right? So he said that's meaningless. Meaning, and that's very common among people who are not educated. They can come to bediני and they said, oh, get is not sufficient. Because remember originally, he has the rights to so maybe she needs a get and she needs וחליצה. So he said, no. The moment he did the ייבום, forget about all the history, right? She's a regular wife. And if the divorces, there's nothing to do with וחליצה, she doesn't need to bother with וחליצה, she just needs to get and that's it. ומחזירה, what is a מחזירה? That's very important. I know a guy, when I was a rabbi in New Jersey, you're going to freak out now. I have a congregant in New Jersey. Every couple of weeks, they used to come for counseling, they want to get divorced. Every couple of weeks, not months. One time he came in and he said, okay, they agreed to divorce, but she come in and she said she will take the get only if he agreed that in 2 years, if she cannot find anybody else, he will take her back. I was... I said, I never heard such a thing. Anyway, to this very day, they're still married. Anyway, unbelievable. So the idea of מחזירה, did you ever heard that, Gilbert? I never heard that before. No. So anyway, people are weird, right? So what's the idea of מחזירה? It means by the Torah law, listen carefully. When a couple divorced, okay, if he's not a Kohen, and he decided to bring her back, he can do that. Right. However, if she have any relationship with a new man, if she married another man, the Torah said the first husband can no longer be her husband forever.
Ever again.
Ever again. So here in our case, if Tamar was Levirate by Shimon, and then Shimon give her a get, and now he wished to bring her back, he can do that because if he's a regular Israel and they're regular husband and wife, and Tamar doesn't have no one else, he's not only can divorce her with no וחליצה, but he can bring her back as a מחזיר גרושתו, alright? Which means she's not forbidden to him forever. So the מגרשה בגט פשיטה. It's obvious that he give her a get and doesn't need to give her וחליצה. So why you even think that way? סלקא דעתה חמינא. You may enter to your mind, הואיל וכתיב, because the Torah said in Deuteronomy 25, ילוקחה לו לאישה ויבמה, the Torah used the language that he will take her as his wife, and he act in a manner of ייבום. אמר רחמן, the Torah said, so you may think that she still carried the title of יבמה. So here is the חידוש, בחליצה in בגט לו. So maybe she needs וחליצה and not a get, כמשמע לן. So here tell us, no, it's a regular husband and wife situation. And therefore the וחליצה doesn't make any difference. לא מעלה ולא מוריד, not make any difference. So therefore she's out of title of יבמה by any means.
Now, but so if he performs וחליצה with a יבמה, so he performs וחליצה instead of ייבום, then she's forbidden forever. Then she's forbidden forever, right? Never again. Can never take her back.
Over.
Right, okay.
מחזירה. So now it tells us that after he did the kinus and then he divorced her, so מחזירה, so it's like a regular wife, pshita, that's obvious, because the moment that she is his wife, why you forbidden after he divorced her to bring her back? So originally she was forbidden to him because she was their brother's wife, right? That was originally, and the year that she married his brother. You may think, oh, let's impose on her the prohibition of the brother's wife, because all days in those years when she married a Reuben, she was forbidden to him as a brother's wife. So now, since he levirate her and he divorced her, you may think that we bring back that old idea, right? Old prohibition. Kamashmע לן, the Mishnah comes to teach us, no, he's a husband and wife, forget about all the levirites, and if he divorced her and she didn't marry anyone, he can bring her back. The moment he did likuchin, the moment he married her, that's it. So then the Mishnah concluded, ובלבד שתהא כתובתה. Only exception to this is that her marriage contract will still be payable from the property of her first husband and not from the property of the Yavam. Maitama, why? Isha iknu lo mina shamayim. A wife was acquired to him by heaven. And since he did not choose her as a wife, it's not a regular. He doesn't went to a J date to find a wife, right? He doesn't go to a speed date, right, Gilbert? He goes, he just happened by force of circumstance. He just born to that family, and now boom, from heaven, they make her his wife, right? So therefore, he did not obligate himself to pay her marriage contract. Alright? Ve'i leit la min harishon, if she doesn't have a ketubah from the property of the first husband, takinu la mishni. So the sages want to take care of her. So then they impose on the Yavam, kedei shlo teheh kalav benav lotzia. That's a very important concept, you see. The rabbis always feel that the husband should respect her. How he respected her? Because if you know that, I can divorce her in a second, right? I don't want to mention, but you understand that there are some faith group that you just say to her, you divorce and goodbye, right? By us, we impose the ketubah with all the complications, so it will not be dim in his eyes such a will easily divorce us. So since doing so will incur a financial burden on his part, so he will think twice before that, because Tosfot tells us here, if he knows that he inherited those properties, and if he divorces her, he will lose that, so then he will think twice. Right? Mishnah. Mitzvah begadol yabem. You see how smart the sages, right? More than the doctors and the lawyers. Right? Mitzvah begadol yabem. We have here smichut parshiyot. We have brothers. Let's call her name. Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda. Many brothers. Right? Reuven passed away. Now the question is, who is the one who takes the obligation of ייבום? So the Mishnah tells us the mitzvah of levirate marriage is for the eldest of the brother to consummate her. So that's called lechatchila. That's the way Yevama yavo alea ulkacha lo v'yibma ve'aya bechor. So the Torah speaks about lechatchila. Rashi tells us that the oldest brother should do ייבום. Now, what do you do with the twin brothers?
Well, who was born
Shimon
first?
and Levi are twin.
That's right. Who was born first, though?
So it's a disputation between the Cheshek Shlomo and the Halachot Ktanot.
I mean, that's resolved with Esav and Yaakov. I mean,
okay.
in Torah, no?
In a way, yes, but there is one of the Gemorahs, you don't have it here, it's called the Sochochov. I have it over there. So he brought this disputation between the Cheshek Shlomo and Halachot Ktanot. How you treat it? Cheshek Shlomo said, is no such a thing b'chor. So therefore, you have to do some type of goral, some type of lottery. One view. Halachot Ktanot said, the first one, by any means that you call first one, is the b'chor. Like in Yaakov and Esav, so in that sense, so it's Esav, right? He comes out first.
Yeah.
But my teacher, my Rebbe, when we study it, said it can be, he disputed the Sochochov, he said it can be a disputation between the Cheshek Shlomo and the Halachot Ktanot, and he said, no, the whole idea of Gadol, as we said, it has to be the one like David said, the one that's come out first, and that's it. Anyway.
But how, I mean, I guess, how do you make the other argument when you, I mean, you even have the mitzvah and that, you know, about if you have two children, one from a hated wife and one from one you love, if the, you know, the son of the hated wife is the bechor, you have to,
right,
you have to inherit that. So I mean, it's
but that's different. You see in the Torah all the big to do between Yaakov and Esav.
Yeah.
What is all about?
Well, I mean,
eventually, if you look at the physical part, who came first?
But Yaakov had to actually negotiate to get the inheritance.
But if you look at the process,
I mean,
they came out together in some ways. because he hold his heel.
Yeah, but one came first. I mean.
But he was still ahead first.
I mean, but the way I read it, because of Torah, because of the fact that he had to negotiate to get the right of the firstborn, that he was, that therefore he accepted that Esav was the firstborn. Otherwise, why would Yaakov have negotiated for it?
Yeah.
Am I?
Rashi tells us here, the whole reason of talking about the first one is, imagine if the oldest one doesn't want to do ייבום, but willing to do וחליצה, and the other brothers wants to do ייבום.
So once the older one does וחליצה, she's forbidden to all the brothers.
Wait, we're not there yet.
Yeah.
Or
I'm getting ahead already.
He refused to do neither ייבום nor וחליצה. He said, I don't want to do anything.
Then the next one.
I can't do that.
So see, לא רצה, if he doesn't want, מהלכין על כל האחים. Basically, we cannot pull a trigger, we cannot pull a gun and say you have to. You go to what? To the brother, which is what? The next in line. If he doesn't want to, we go next one. That's what Rashi tells us in page 24. So then, לא רצו, you go to all the list of the brothers, they all didn't want to bother, חוזרים אצל גדול ואומרים לו, עליך מצווה או חלוץ או יבם. Right? So you go back to the first one and you now said to him, hey, you have a choice. If you don't want to do ייבום, do וחליצה, but you cannot be a free bird. You have to do something. Alright? תלה בקטן, which means they have a youngest brother who is not in the age of ייבום, and the oldest brother said, let her wait, like Tamar wait in the Torah for Sheila. Let her wait for the youngest brother until he grew up, and she agdil. Or begadol, or the oldest one, he is over there in Antarctica or in Australia, right? And we wait ad שיבוא ממדינת הים, and maybe he does ייבום. Or חירש או שותה, that maybe they will heal this death, or someone who's not total there, right? And maybe they do ייבום. אין שומעים לו. You do not delay mitzvah. You have to do it right away. And even if there is the option that the mitzvah of the gadol, the oldest, will be first, because he is not before us, before the eye of the Bet Din, either because he's not ready yet, he's too young, or he's away, you don't do that, but you impose upon other brothers. The same way, the mitzvah of וחליצה, maybe it's a ייבום later. If it's now, we have pretty on her, we have rachmanus on her, and you do it right away. This is one of the important concepts in halacha. It's called inui din. Inui din, it means that the person is waiting for his verdict, and he's in a state of waiting, and that's a huge torture for people, right? You have a court case and delay, and the good lawyers always, if they don't have a solution, they postpone the case, right? So basically, that's called inui din. You can't do that. She's waiting, you need to solve it right away. Either do ייבום, either do וחליצה, either do something. You can't wait for someone to come far away. You can't wait for someone to grow up. You have to do it right away. You see what happened to Torah and Tamar. She had to pretend to be prostitute and all these things because she was waiting forever to the youngest brother. אלא אומרים לו, עליך מצווה, או חלוץ או יבם. They go back to the oldest brother and says, hey, you cannot run away from your responsibility. You are here we pull a trigger on you. You have to choose. Either you do וחליצה or ייבום. Right? And he cannot run away from that. Meaning we try to go to other brothers. If he doesn't walk, we force him. Right? Itma. Bi'at katan v'chalitzat gadol. We ask you a question about that it's a disputation between Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. Chad amar bi'at katan adifa v'chad amar chalitzat gadol adifa. Which means the oldest brother, Rashi said, doesn't want to do ייבום, but he's ready to do וחליצה. The younger brother wants to do ייבום. So the younger doesn't mean much, but he's just younger from one brother. But he's the oldest in age, he can do ייבום. So here you see that if you have that option, so Chadamar, the first one, which usually is the first one, Rabbi Yochanan said that bi'at katan adifa, that it's better to go by the younger brothers, and others said no, you have to go b'chalitzah of the gadol, of the eldest. Now, why the Gemara put here ייבום first in chalitza? Because as we said, Abba Shaul, soon we're going to study him. Abba Shaul tells us that we have issue here of what? Of the sincerity of the ייבום. If his other motivation, he said it's close to arayot, close to a violation, to abomination, because if it's not clear to perpetuate the soul of the deceased, go out and release her, and that's it. Mind amar biat katan adifa da mitzvah biyibum. Alright? Uman da amar chalitzat gadol adifa, bimkom gadol biat katan lav klum hi. Tnan. Lo ratza, machzirin al kol shar ha'achim. So if the oldest one doesn't want to, you go to all the other brothers. Mai la'av lo ratza liyabem ela lachlotz. Which means he doesn't want to do ייבום, he only wants to do וחליצה. וקטנים הלכין אצל האחים שמאמינה ביאת קטן עדיפה, which means it's better to go by the younger brother than to have the release from the oldest one. So the Gemara said, לא רצה לחלוץ ולא לייבם. Which means, לכתחילה, at the first option, we do not enforce upon the oldest brother to do ייבום. דקבתה גבי האחים לא רצו לא לחלוץ ולא לייבם. המאי חוזרים אצל גדול למכפייה. We can force him to do either חליצה or ייבום. לכפי לדידו. So we can do that with all the other brothers. So since they involve already with the youngest, so let's enforce upon one of the brothers why you need to go back to the oldest brother. To the Rashash here, Rashash explained absolutely brilliantly here. He said this is already, we see in the Mishnah, that only for the oldest brother we do not enforce it. If he doesn't want, the brothers, if the other brothers wants to do it, it's fine. You cannot, you don't need to go and enforce the oldest brother. But just because he is the oldest, you do not enforce here. So they said, Kevan de mitzvah alei didei ramya, because the mitzvah is incumbent upon the oldest brother, he holds the mitzvah of ייבום, ledidei kaifinan. So therefore, we go and enforce him, since all the other brothers refuse to do neither chalitza nor ייבום. And therefore we have no other choice but to go to the option of enforcement. So we have to go to the oldest brother, because if you go by the way the Torah speaks, it's go by the oldest brother. Tnan, we learn in Mishnah, Tala bekatan, which means the older brother said, leave me alone, I have a younger brother, he's not mature yet, but when he grew up he will take care of that. Ad sheyagdil, and shomim lo, you don't listen to him, but you force him to do either chalitza or ייבום. V'i biat katan adifa, if you tell me that it's better to stay within the family and you have to go by the youngest brother, it's better to have chalitza from the oldest brother. Amayen shomim lo, why you don't listen to oldest brother? Dilma nintar, dilma gadilu miyabem, maybe it's like what Yehuda said to Tamar in the Torah. Let's wait for the youngest brother, and then he do ייבום. So it means that the ייבום of the youngest brother, it's not necessarily better than the chalitza of the oldest. So the Gemara rejected that. They said, and according to your view, בקטן, בגדול, עד שיבוא ממדינת הים. אין שומעים לו, Amai nintar dilma ate vechalitz. Maybe he come back from Antarctica, from Australia, and he will do chalitza ela kol shahuye mitzvah lo shahinan. We do not delay the performance of a mitzvah. So consequently, if one of the brothers is currently unable to perform the mitzvah, he is not considered at all, and therefore no proof can be driven from this Mishnah. 39b, it the amrei bebi'a kule alma lo plige, devi'at katan adifa. So others said, we are on page 39b, a different version of the disputation between Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi. If the youngest brother wished to do ייבום, everyone, meaning Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, both agree that the younger brother cohabitation is more important, is preferable to the וחליצה of an older brother, since ייבום is preferable to וחליצה. Ki plige, the disputation between Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, b'chalitzat katan, when the youngest brother wished to do וחליצה, not ייבום, והחי itma, וחליצת קטן וחליצת גדול. Now we're not talking about ייבום, we talk only about וחליצה, and the differences between young versus oldest. פליגי ברבי יוחנן ורבי ישוע בן לוי. אחד אמר חליצת גדול עדיפה, ואחד אמר כי הדד אינינו. Meaning one said that, usually one is go by the first one, so let's say Rabbi Yochanan. He said that חליצת גדול, since the subsequent order in the manner that it's written in the Torah in Deuteronomy 25 speaks about the oldest take precedence before the others. Therefore, when it's come, even in the act of releasing by וחליצה of the widow Tamar, it's better to go by the oldest brother versus the other. For our discussion, let's say it's Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi hold that it's equal and is no preferable manner to the oldest brother. Now the Gemara elaborates on these two views. Man de'amar וחליצת גדול עדיפה, the one who holds, let's say if it's Rabbi Yochanan, he said that the וחליצה from the oldest brother is more, it's preferable, the ha-mitzvah begadol, which means that the way that we interpreted the Torah in Deuteronomy 25, ve'idach, and the other who said that וחליצה of the youngest brother is equal to the oldest one, ki amrinan mitzvah begadol. When we say that the primary mitzvah is incumbent on the oldest brother, le'inyan ייבום, it's in regard to ייבום, aval le'inyan וחליצה kahadad eininu. But regarding to וחליצה, the Torah said that there is no any priority between the two, and therefore they are equal. So the whole idea of mitzvah of gadol, of the oldest, applies solely for ייבום, and we cannot derive from that any manner of וחליצה. It's none. Now we challenge the point, the view that it's equal. לא רצו. What we said earlier. You go by the order of the brothers. Shimon, the oldest brother, refused. You go to Levi, you go to Yehuda, you go to Issachar, you go to Zvulun. All the brothers. None of them wants to do that. What did we say so far? We have to go back to square one, to Shimon, and tell him, you have to do it. Okay? חוזרין אצל גדול. מה אליו? לא רצו לייבם אלא לחלוץ. What do you mean by saying that Levi and Yehuda and Issachar and Zvulun and all the other brothers refused to do? They refused to do what? ייבום. וקטני, so therefore what we understand, you go to square one and you give Shimon an option, is the oldest brother, to do, pick and choose, either ייבום or וחליצה. So why you just tell me that they are equal? How you tell me that? וקטני חוזרין אצל גדול. And what we will learn, in the Mishnah clearly, in order for the oldest brother to finalize the case with Tamar, he has to make up his mind, and how do you say it? You pull a trigger on him, said boom, Shimon, pick and choose, either do ייבום or release her. So therefore, Ushma Mina, Chalitzat Gadol Adifa. You see a clear source from the Mishnah that you go by the Gadol, by the oldest. So why you tell me that they are equal? So the Gemara rejected and said, Lo רצו לא לחלוץ ולא לייבם. All the other brothers, Levi, Yehuda, Issachar, Zvulun, none of them wants to do anything with anybody. They just want to stay away from the story. Alright? So therefore, wait a second. Dichvatei gabe gadol. When we tell us that the Mishnah said that the oldest brother refused to do it, lo ratza. The oldest one refused to do what? Lo lachalotz velo leyabem. Which means, if the oldest brother, he refused to do ייבום, but the responsa panimi wrote said, he was willing to do וחליצה. But Bet Din said, no, not yet. We're not out of business. Let's go to youngest brothers, and then we see if you really need to do וחליצה. Okay? Because maybe Yehuda, Yissachar, Zvulun, maybe the youngest are interested in her to do ייבום, right? I mean, not so much in her, in the perpetuation of the soul, right? So it means that you see from that, Panim Yerot said that the ייבום of the youngest brother is better than וחליצה from the oldest brother. So if that's the case, if the oldest brother refused to do neither ייבום nor וחליצה, and then all the other brothers, which is Levi, Yehuda, Issachar, and Zvulun, refused to do neither ייבום nor וחליצה, אלא מה חוזרים אצל גדול? So why you go back to square one to Shimon? You know why? Where's Eddie? We bring the gun and we pull the trigger, right? Lich michpeye. We're going to force him. Lich piyuledidu. So let's do that to everyone. Why to all this? So since none of the brothers wish to do neither ייבום nor וחליצה, why we impose upon the Bet Din to go back to the oldest brother and enforce him to do it? It's enough to do it with one of the youngest brothers. Why? Because since the Bet Din already dealing with the youngest brothers, remember, the oldest one refused, now they go by the youngest brother. Why they do that? Wherever they are now in a negotiation, let's say they are now talking to Issachar, they said, Issachar, hey, we already approached the others before you, alright? We're now talking to you. Guess what? Since we went already to Shimon, we went into Levi, we went into Yehuda, all of them are not interested in ייבום, and you're also not interested in Issachar, guess what? Now you should do וחליצה and goodbye. Right? Why we ask the circle to go back to square one? Correct? Everyone understands? So they said, כיוון דמצווה עלי דידי רמיה, because the essence, the way that we interpret it, the way that you read carefully the text in Deuteronomy 25, the essence of the text speaks about what? About the oldest brother's obligations, v'haya habechor, right? So therefore, ledidei kaifina, we specifically take the responsibility upon the oldest brother, and therefore we enforce upon him to do it more than the others. And that's the way the response of the rabbis like Bach and others, Yeshresh Yaakov, all of them said so. Tashma. Here you see a proof from the Mishnah. Tala begadol, which means you go now, Shimon is out in Australia. You go to Levi. And Levi said, wait a second, let's wait for Shimon to return from Australia. עד שיבוא ממדינת הים. What we said, אין שומעים לו. You don't listen to him. You force him to do either וחליצה or ייבום. ואיסל כדעתך, and if it's entered to your mind to think, חליצת גדול עדיפה, that when it's come to priority, and when you have no ייבום involvement anymore, only חליצה, you go by the oldest brother, amayen shomim lo. Why you don't listen to him to wait? Nintar dilma ate vechalitz. Maybe it's proper for us to wait until Shimon returned from his journey in Australia or Antarctica or whatever is he overseas, and he comes back and he should do chalitza. Why you do it right away? So he said, Ule ta'amech, and according to your view, bekatan ad shiagdil and shomim lo. When it's the youngest brother, you don't listen and you do it right away. Amai ninta dilma gadilu miabem. Maybe the youngest brother will pass, the age that he's ready for that, and you do it. Iname ate ihu umiabma. He will come and do ייבום, which means that because you don't wait to oldest brother to come back from overseas, which means so you do it, you don't wait. Ela kol shahuye mitzvah lo shahinan. So the Aruch Laner explained to us that when it's come to mitzvah, you do not delay, that maybe it will be in a better way, a different place. Maybe someone will come over, the oldest brother from far away, or the youngest one will raise the age that he can do it. No, you do it now. So if the oldest brother is away, you don't wait. Maybe he will do it. Even his chalitza is better than the others. Nanatam. We learn in the Mishnah in Tractate Bechorot, page 13. מצוות ייבום קודמת למצוות חליצה. The mitzvah of levirate marriage is preferable to the mitzvah of חליצה. בראשונה, listen, this is very, very important what we study now. בראשונה, שהיו מתכוונים לשם מצווה. Originally, in those generations, it was that they have the intent solely for the sake of mitzvah involved. עכשיו שאין מתכוונים לשם מצווה, now look how smart the rabbis, they realize, that's the way the Or Zarua explained to us, they realize that most of the people have other motivation. אמרי מצוות חליצה קודמת למצוות ייבום, that the chalitza is better, that soon you see the view of Abba Shaul. Amarav ein kofim. So you cannot force chalitza if there is a chance to do ייבום. Even now we say that chalitza is preferable than ייבום. Why? Because most of the people not intend to do it purely to have the perpetuation of this deceased soul. But anyway, you do not enforce that. Only if they wish to do ייבום, you leave them alone. Ki atu lekamei dei Rav. When those Yevamim came before Rav, amar lehu, iba et chalitz, iba et yabem. You have the option, you can do chalitza, you can do ייבום. Bedidach tala rachmana. The Torah gives it in your hand. Why? The Torah said, Deuteronomy 25, V'im lo yachpotz haish. If you don't do ish, ha'im chafetz, iba chalitz, iba yabem, we leave it for you. It's like democracy, right? We give you the choice to do it. That's the way Rashi said. It depends upon his wishes. Remember one time, I have a brother, he's 1 year younger than me. He's a Rosh Yeshiva in Slonim, in Beitar. And he married the Slonim Rebbe's daughter, the great Rabbi Brzozowski, who used to be the Rosh Yeshiva. So his wife's grandfather, the late Netivot Shalom, Reb Shalom Noach Brazovsky, was the great Slonimer Rebbe. I'm talking back 27 years ago. So it was the Shabbos, I think Sheva Brochas, if I'm not mistaken. Either Ofru for Sheva Brochas. Anyway, we did it with the Rebbe. The Rebbe made a big tish and a big shalishudis, and who knows how many people. On my brother's wedding, it will not be exaggeration to say thousands of people. I remember Rav Oyerbach, Rav Eliashiv, all the great Rabbonim came to my brother's wedding because of the Slonimer Rebbe. He was the grandfather, etc. So anyway, Shalishudis, my father, God give him strength and many years of good health. He was sitting next to the Netivot Shalom, next to the Slonimer Rebbe, between the current Rebbe and the former Rebbe, and my brother was sitting next to them. So anyway, the Netivot Shalom turned to my father, doing Shalishudis, and he said to my father in Yiddish that he should give a Dvar Torah. Now, first of all, this is a huge audience, huge. If you go to one of these, the Square Rebbe, the Belzer Rebbe, you see what I'm talking about. It's a huge audience. And those who know my father, they will have a chance to know my father a little bit. That's not my father nature. So my father refused. So I remember the Slonimer Rebbe, the Tivot Shalom, turned to my father and he said to him in Hebrew, and he said, Kan yesh demokratia. Here is democracy. We're not forcing anybody to do anything. Anyway, so here we said about the Yavam, he has the choice, either to do ייבום or to do וחליצה. ואף Rav Yehuda Savar, and Rav Yehuda likewise maintain, ein kofin, that he hold that we do not force them into וחליצה. That's the way Rashi said. According to Rabbeinu Tam, is the opposite, that we do not enforce ייבום, even if the intent to do it for the sake of the mitzvah, but we leave them alone to do וחליצה if they wish. That's the way it is. Mid'atkin Rav Yehuda begita the וחליצה, because that Rav Yehuda instituted the language in the וחליצה document that his court will issue, and that's they said, Eich plonit bat ploni, akarav tiad ploni yevama kadmana levet dina. That's the language. Daughter of daughter so and so brought so and so her Yivam before the court, etc., etc. Ve'ish temodan da'inhu da'achua demitna me'aba nihu, and we recognize that he is the brother of the deceased from the father. Remember, that's only for the father applies. Ve'amri le'itzavit leyabem, if you wish to perform ייבום, yabem. Ve'im lo itla lach raglich di'imina, if you don't wish, extend to her your right foot for וחליצה. That's the way the Rashi said, that's the root of the word itla. Ve'itla lei raglad yemina, move the right foot. Ushrat sinei me'al ragloi, and she removed his shoes from his own foot. Ve'yarakt be'anpo iroka lemitchazia lebedina al ar'a, and she spat before him spit that was visible to the court on the floor. That's the Tosfot disagree with the word al ara, that doesn't need to be on the floor anyway. ורבי חייא בר אביה מסיים בה משמי דרב יהודה והקרינו מה דכתיב בספר דאורייתא דמשה, which means we'll read clearly all the language that it's written in the Torah in Deuteronomy 25, which means the language of וחליצה that Rav Yehuda instituted. It's said that they give the Yavam the option to do it, which means he has full choice. Ve'ishtemod da'inhu, and we understand from that, Plige ba Rav Acha ve'Ravina, Chad amar be'edim, that you have to have two kosher witnesses, ve'chad amar afilu karov, va'afilu isha, and one said even one relative or one woman may be relied upon. which means in order to have that evidence, even if one ad and even is not befitting, for example, he's connected to the judges, he connected to one party, or if it's a woman witness, we in that case accepted. Vehilcheta, and the bottom line, the halacha is galuye milta be'almau. It's merely a matter of revealing the fact of the matter, which means this is just in a way, it's like the Rif explained, it's like almost like symbolic act. It's just an expression. Va'afilu karov, va'afilu isha, which means that it's not something that have the essence that of the Tashbetz, Tshuvot Shimon ben Tzemach is the 14th century in Algeria. Great rabbi explained that this is not the essence of the וחליצה. It's just somehow a sort of symbolic declaration.
Boyachem leshuloim alachai yeshuloim malachai